Yo, hello. Welcome to the alternate point of view. My name is Tracy Lee. Welcome all of the new people that are watching, and welcome back to all of my OGs, everyone who has been ever so faithful watching this channel. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you will all continue watching, and I hope the new people will subscribe, like, and share. Please leave a comment. I greatly appreciate it. So I hope that you all enjoy this channel. Today, we are going to be talking about the final day of the Black Swan ballerina trial. As we all know, we have been waiting for, 4 years almost for this trial to come to fruition since Doug Benefield has been gone from this earth. So we pray for the Benefield family and pray that they get justice for Doug. Ashley Benefield, if you do recall, back in September of 2020, she decided to take matters into her own hands in this custody battle with Doug. Let's say custody/reconciliation battle with Doug, where she decided to take his life. And she claimed it was self-defense/stand your ground. Want to talk about today was closing arguments. Finally, after the defense has long and drawn out this trial for quite some time, because Ashley has come up with every excuse in the book to prolong this. Her daughter and Doug's daughter is now 6 years old. It is very sad because Doug's family probably has had zero contact with Emerson, and Emerson believes her father is probably a terrible, terrible person, and she's never going to know who he is because Ashley has kept, just kept everything away from her. And she's even been, this poor little 6-year-old child has even been out on the streets protesting against her mother going to jail. So let's get into what the prosecution and defense's cases are. Well, as we know, Ashley and Doug met back in, I believe, 2015, 2016. They knew each other for all of 13 whole days. There is a 30-year difference between the two of them. They got married after 13 whole days of knowing each other. And Ashley talked Doug into reversing a vasectomy so she could get pregnant. She talked Doug into investing in a ballet studio, a ballet business and company, actually, as they're called, a company. I'm so sorry. And investing in that, starting a ballet company that had dancers from all over come and audition for this company. They were paying these dancers. Then Ashley became pregnant and she moved away and left the company and left all the dancers, left Doug, left the investors, left everything. And while she was pregnant, she moved to Florida with her mother and left Doug and left Doug's daughter, who was only 15. Also, I need to mention that Doug had just lost his wife 9 months prior to him marrying Ashley. All of these things happened in a very short amount of time. And Ashley was the driving force of all of this. Now, I won't say that Doug was a perfect angel. He was trying very hard to keep this relationship together. He did some things that were, I would say, pretty cringe, as the kids say today. He did fire a weapon in the house. He also did something for me that is absolutely unspeakable, and that is he punched his dog till he knocked the dog out, and that is that's pretty awful for me. But I will say what Ashley did to him was the worst. She actually killed him. Now, why does all of this matter? Why does all of this seem to be strange? You would think, oh my gosh, Doug seems like a terrible person. He fired a weapon in the house. He hit the dog. Why wouldn't she run away? Well, it's terrible because Ashley and Doug had just gotten married. They had just celebrated their wedding with all of their friends. And Ashley still wanted him to get a vasectomy, and he did. He did whatever he wanted her to do to please her. You would think a 54-year-old man at this point in time would know by now, you know, what to do. But he just lost his wife less than a year before, tragically and unexpectedly. And Doug just was looking for, I don't know, something. And he found Ashley and he thought he found something in someone, obviously much younger. I don't know really what they had in common, but something. And he did whatever it took to please her, make her happy. And that's exactly what he did. And then she took off. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, suddenly she was so sick, she could only be taken care of by her mother. And that's what she did. She went to Florida and they were separated for basically years. I mean, a year at least. And she went back to South Carolina, packed all her things, left Doug a long note saying, "See ya, wouldn't want to be ya, and I'm out." And Doug was shocked. He had no idea. She chose to have this baby all on her own and didn't want anything to do with him ever again. And he didn't know what to think, what to do. But Doug did everything in his power to try to be a part of his child's life. And Ashley did everything in her power to keep him away from their child. And he didn't understand why. So she had the baby, and Doug was not there. And Doug did everything he could to fight to be there for his child. And Ashley, realizing that this wasn't going to work, that she wasn't going to get rid of Doug so easily, decided, okay, I guess what I'll do is I will reconcile with you. Since all of my injunctions and all of my lying and all of my attempts to make you seem like a terrible father in person is not working, I'm going to pretend like I'm going to reconcile with you. And she did that. She pretended like they were going to get back together. They were going to move to Maryland together. They were going to pack all their stuff up and go to Maryland together. And that's exactly what she had leading up all the way to the day that she killed him. Now, to hear the defense tell it, the defense says that Doug was harassing her, stalking her, abusing her, all of these things. And even on the stand, Ashley would say that Doug never laid a hand on her. Never. So I want to show you a little bit of the prosecution's closing argument because I think you'll find it interesting that the prosecution says that this is all made up. Ashley was never afraid of Doug. I mean, from the first time that they met to drop off the baby between each other, Ashley offered to go with him and hang out with them and the baby. And from then on, they were inseparable. And they went to the beach together. They went out to eat together. They did everything together. But I will say, in looking at the text messages back and forth from each other, that Ashley and Doug, their messages back and forth to each other were obviously different. Doug would send a Bible verse every day, and Ashley would just send emojis. And I don't know about you, but I know when people send emojis, because I'm kind of that person too. When I'm like just sending emoji, I'm kind of like not really into the conversation. It's just a simple response, or I'm just like emoji or smiley face or whatever, because it's easier to do than type out a sentence. Or if I'm busy, I'll send an emoji. Or if you're that woman in the relationship, or you're that guy in the relationship where you're just kind of not really that into it, you're just going to send an emoji just kind of like, okay, that's cool. Or you're going to love a conversation or like a conversation. And that's kind of what Ashley was doing to Doug. And Doug was just rolling with it. Doug was rolling with it because he just wanted to have a relationship with his child. And he thought the best way to do that was to stay with Ashley. And Doug, by the way, had filed for divorce a couple of times because at one point, Ashley even went and got engaged to another man. And Doug found out about it. So I want to show you a little bit of the prosecution's part, and then you can see that they are, of course, trying to get back together, and then they decide to, well, Ashley decides, should I say. Sorry. Ashley decides to end it in the worst way ever. And that is with a gun. And the way she apparently does this, the way the trajectory of the shooting is pretty strange, because it seems like, and also the way she showed on the stand, she showed that she was like pointing downwards. So that's odd, because that means that Doug was on the ground. So I'm just curious.
The detective said in 20 whatever years that he's been doing this job, he has never had anybody ask him to do that.
So
never. And she was very adamant, and they talked for 15 to 20 minutes.
The police officer.
And she went from crying almost hysterically to aggressive and yelling at him, and then screeching at the top of her lungs, all because she could not get him to go with her plan.
Yeah.
She also said to him, "You will fucking arrest him in front of the judge, and I will make sure that you do." Then she said, "I will do anything I have to do to keep my baby, asshole." She wasn't saying, "I'm so afraid of this man. Please help me. I'm a victim of domestic violence. I need help." Not at all. She's saying, "I want to keep my baby." And she's afraid that this man, who is 30 years older than she is, and a lot more established, has a lot more money, has a lot more resources, she's afraid that this man is going to get custody of her child instead of her. So after this discussion with Detective Gillum, in about September 17th of 2018, the second hearing for the injunction happens. Remember, this injunction hearing was in two parts. One was in July and one was in September. All of the same allegations. He's poisoning me, the stuff in South Carolina. Again, we're not even living together. And she fails. The judge in that case says, no injunction. And this man will have immediate visitation with his child, who, by the way, was 6 months old and he'd never met her. It wasn't for lack of trying. There may be a lot of deadbeat dads out there that don't care about seeing their children, that don't want to be around. This man tried everything to be around for his child, to be there for the birth, to visit the child, to see the child, and she kept the child away from him for 6 months. And the first visitation, you heard from Stephanie Murphy, the first visitation, all of a sudden, everything's glorious again. Now, all of a sudden, the defendant wants to go with him. I'll go with you. And now we're in a stage where we're acting like we're going to get back together. Because she knew the court system was not working, and she was afraid that if she didn't buddy up to him, he was going to get this child away from her. So it begins the charade of her telling him, we're going to get back together, we're going to be a family. She played on Doug Benefield's wishes. He wanted more than anything to have a family, his family together, to have his wife that he loved and this child all together. And she kept telling him, yes, that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to work towards. So that starts about a year of them kind of getting along, right? And then September 2019, which is about a year later, Doug finds out she's dating someone else. He files for divorce. And a series of complaints start against Doug Benefield for now abusing the child. Which, by the way, were investigated by law enforcement, and not one of them resulted in any charges. And May 1st of 2020, the defendant, having failed in the criminal system, again, filed for another injunction. Based on these allegations that fail in the criminal system. Do you see a pattern here? May 4th, only a few days later,
none of that was
after she filed for another injunction, Doug filed for sole custody of the child. This is Ashley Benefield's biggest fear, that this man is going to get sole custody. But she's making all of these grand allegations against him that he knows are not true. There's got to be something wrong, and it's probably not safe for this child to even be with her. So he files for full custody. And what happens? All of a sudden, she sidles up to him, and now we're getting back together. And we start to go to marriage counseling. And we go see Dr. Forrest, who referred them to Dr. Quintel. And they're going to marriage counseling about how they're going to get together. And to Doug, she's saying, yes, I want to reconcile. Let's get back together. But behind his back to the doctor, she's like, no, I know how. I'm not getting together with him. Then she goes on all these social outings with Doug and the child. Goes to the beach, goes to the movies, goes out to dinner, to lunch, swims at the pool in his apartment complex. Giving Doug all of these mixed signals. We're gonna reconcile. We're gonna get all this back together. And in the back of her mind, she knew all along. She was waiting for an opportunity to strike. And then 6/1 of 2020, The system sends them for an evaluation with Dr. Broder. They're like, what is going on here? Someone needs an evaluation. So they go to this evaluation with Dr. Broder, and this deception on the part of Ashley Benefield continues. She does the same thing. We're going to reconcile, we're going to get back together, and then when she's not with him, she's saying that that's not true. And then towards the end of September 2020, but before the 21st, there's a last meeting between Ashley Benefield and Dr. Broder, who said it was in his office. She was leaving, she was walking through the waiting room and going to the door, and she's upset because this is not going fast enough. I want the report, I want this to be done. We need to move to Maryland. Why do you think she's moving to Maryland? We need to move to Maryland. This is taking way too much time. And she says to him, I'll take matters into my own hands. And that was 7 days, up to 17 days before, depending on about what time it was, he gets murdered. On 9/21 of 2020, after this comment to Dr. Broder, she goes to mediation with Doug Benefield, and they end the mediation saying, everyone's going to drop everything. Because at this point, Doug had filed for divorce, again. And Ashley had filed for an injunction, again. So at this hearing on the 30th, those things were going to be heard, as well as a joint motion to release a report by Dr. Broder. But they go to mediation, and at the end of mediation, it's very fast, because they all agree, we're dropping everything. We're going to Maryland. So that was the plan. Ashley Benefield had no intention of dropping that injunction. Look at the text messages between her and Doug that were introduced by the state for the week before this homicide murder happened. They're talking to each other about the fact that everything's going to be dropped. Give this attorney a call. Okay, I'll give that attorney a call. Ashley's telling him we're going to drop everything. And she knew that was not true. Her attorney testified, we were not dropping that injunction. We were ready to call witnesses. At that hearing on the 30th, we were going forward. Ashley Benefield knew that day it was over. It was going to be over. Her entire charade was going to be done. This entire get along, go along that she's trying to say was because of domestic violence. She was just trying to fake Doug out. And she knew that on the 30th,
her
ruse was up. Because if she goes forward with an injunction, what better way to tell someone you're not going to reconcile than trying to get another injunction?
She blinks a lot.
So what does this timeline tell us for what happened at the time of the shooting? Okay, it's background, yes. But also, it tells you they did not live together for 3 years.
3 years.
And if there was violence towards Ashley Benefield in South Carolina, that was 3 years before. And they haven't lived together since. And is that something that justified her being in such fear of Doug Benefield that it was necessary to shoot and kill him? The answer is no. I do want to talk a little bit about domestic violence, and Mr. Ferris testified a lot about this wheel, this power and control wheel. So I want to put it up there. First of all, the overarching umbrella right here is.
So, as she's stating, the fact that they haven't lived together for 3 years, and she's talking about she was in fear of him. She had no choice. But again, they were talking about reconciling, getting back together, moving to Maryland. They were packing their things in a U-Haul. The text messages that day, she was like, hey, can you stop and get some more boxes and some tape? I still have some little things to pack. It's just shocking that that's how she's talking to him. And he's like, yeah, I'll grab some boxes. I have some more stuff to pack too. So he's under the impression that they're going together. There is none of this, like, we're not going together type of situation. So that's what's interesting, is that in his mind, they are moving together. So when the defense gets up and does his closing argument, his is saying, that he says he had no idea. He's saying she has no idea that they're moving together. I'm trying to find where he. So he is trying to say
Remember that common sense I told you about that you're going to be able to take with you back into the jury room, and that without offending anybody, there will probably be more than 100 years worth of it?
He's going to say in his closing argument.
Does anyone believe that either side calls witnesses that they don't know what they're going to say? So how do you reconcile the state calling Murphy and Gillum knowing that they're going to testify inaccurately? Read Gillum's written email about how he misrepresented his knowledge of when that South Carolina domestic violence injunction went into effect when he testified in front of you, and read the emails between Stephanie Murphy, Faith Brown, and Judge Moreland's judicial assistant. Okay, so what happens after that testimony? I want you to remember that the state's theory of prosecution up to that point is that Ashley Benefield killed Douglas Benefield to stop the release of the Broder report because she was so afraid of what was in it. And right in front of your eyes, I've never seen it before, right in front of your eyes, the state changes their theory. And the next thing you know, their theory of prosecution is she killed him because the domestic violence injunction was scheduled 3 days later. Check your notes. See if what I'm telling you is not accurate.
In the white shirt.
Both theories, honestly, are ridiculous.
Objection. Sustained on that.
Both theories are not supported by common sense. Let's look at Broder. What exactly was it in Broder's report that Ashley Benefield was so afraid of that she killed Douglas Benefield? Check your notes, but try to think back to Broder's testimony. I think your notes will reveal that Broder never had one thing adverse to say about Ashley Benefield. In fact, the only thing that Broder had to say was that after evaluating Ashley Benefield, he found that she had no violent tendencies. She was not prone to impetuous acts. That's it. Her only concern, according to Dr. Quintel, was that she was afraid if Doug found out what she had to say about him, that he would take it out on her or on the child. Okay, let's look at the theory then when it shifts to it being the domestic violence injunction that was scheduled for the 30th of September. What kind of reason exactly is that for her to kill Doug Benefield? If that was a reason, wouldn't she have done it before? There was already a domestic violence injunction the first time. It was denied. It was not only denied, but Judge Moreland ordered shared custody of the child.
Yep.
Why wouldn't she have killed him then? For 4 years, Ashley Benefield did what any law-abiding citizen can be expected to do. She filed complaint after complaint after complaint, calling Doug Benefield's behavior to the attention of the authorities with no result.
That's right, because there was
over and over again. No relief.
Not one scintilla.
So she kills him. Really, that's quite a leap, ladies and gentlemen. You need evidence to support such an inference. You know, you can't take innuendo and wrap it up in an inference and call it a fact.
That's right.
You got to have evidence that supports a theory. For example, you know, in the reasonable doubt instruction, I'm going to show you in a minute, but it says a reasonable doubt can arise from the evidence, from the lack of evidence, and from a conflict in the evidence. So what evidence would you need to show to support this theory that flies in the face of common sense?
So it's funny that he says that you need evidence, right? Because for 4 years, like he said, she went to a judge. She filed injunction after injunction after injunction. And every single time she was struck down. Judge Moreland actually said there was not one scintilla of proof of her accusations against Doug, that she denied every single one of Ashley's accusations against Doug. So it's funny and very ironic that he is saying this about the prosecution having to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because Ashley made numerous accusations against Doug, and not a single time was she ever given any right to any of those accusations. So it's funny that he's saying this, because Ashley is a liar, and she not one time was found to be right. So I wish that the jury would have caught on to this, because they're taking quite some time, much longer than I expected, to come back with a verdict. They're still out in deliberation. So this is something that I caught that was very ironic of him to say. There's many things that are quite ironic that he says in his closing arguments.
Well, how about somebody who comes in and testifies, yes, I heard Ashley, I overheard her say, you know what, I'd kill this SOB before I'd let him be alone with my child. Or how about this? How about downloading from Ashley's phone when she's sitting there in her most private moments, never expecting it to be revealed to the world, searching on the internet how to kill an abusive spouse. How about that? Instead, what you saw in her most private moments, 6 months before this happened, was her searching on the internet how to co-parent with an abusive spouse. Am I making this up? Check your notes. How to get along with an abusive spouse. In my opening statement, I told you two things. I said that at the conclusion of the case, those were the only two things that would be established beyond a reasonable doubt. The first one was that Doug Benefield was a very sick guy. I think there's no doubt of that. The second thing was that Ashley's action on that day, September 27th, 2020, was absolutely justified. Let's take a look briefly at Douglas Benefield's behavior. And I want you to keep in mind Bruce Ferris's testimony, who's the former cop who specialized in domestic violence, ran a domestic violence department, and then was so fascinated by it, went back to school to become a licensed mental health counselor. I thought he was a pretty persuasive witness. Doug Benefield shoots a gun into the ceiling of their kitchen to intimidate Ashley to stop speaking. Now, those are easy words for me to speak, and they fall on ears and you move on to the next thing. But I want you to try to imagine how it would feel.
Objection.
How would one feel sitting in their kitchen, having their husband pull out a gun and actually fire it into the ceiling of their kitchen? Can you imagine the trauma of such a statement? Do you think that that's something that you forget about after 6 months, after a year? I think that's something you remember for the rest of your life. You never forget it. Throwing a loaded gun at Ashley Benefield, threatening suicide, not only to Ashley, but to his former wife, Renee. You've got a copy of her text message that she wrote to Doug, kicking her on their honeymoon and threatening suicide. So this is twice now, not only with Ashley, but with his prior wife. Punching the dog so hard that he knocked the dog unconscious. Bruce Ferris on the wheel. Now, I'm not an expert on the wheel. I don't pretend to know it anywhere near as well as apparently Ms. O'Donnell does. But I can tell you with certainty that it has a provision, and Bruce Ferris.
So he's talking about the wheel of abuse and the pattern of abuse. This doctor, I believe, psychologist got up and talked about the patterns of abuse and an abuser. And Doug, kind of, some of the behavior patterns fell on the wheel. Some of them did not. It was very borderline. So I wouldn't say that their relationship really, it was kind of on the wheel, I would say, as far as some of the patterns, but really it was more Ashley was more on the abuser wheel than Doug. Doug had a couple of flub ups, I would say, as far as that shooting with the gun in the ceiling and the punching the dog. Yes. Doug had some anger issues, I would say. But I wouldn't say he never hit Ashley. She said that he never abused her. I think he had some issues as far as how to express his anger, letting it out. But he never let his anger out onto her or his ex-wife. I think it's disappointing that they're taking a couple of incidents where Doug did lash out and making it seem like that's how Doug was his entire life. I mean, Doug was 50 something years old. They have 50 plus years of his life to go over. His daughter, his wife prior, before she died, there's never been a domestic dispute in his life. There's never been anything that they could dig up on him aside from those couple of incidents. So there's never been a time where Doug has ever been in jail or cops have been called on him or anything like that. So they're trying to paint this picture of Doug that is making him sound like a very bad person. And he's not this terrible person that they're trying to make him out to be. But they're doing it, of course, because, they have to make her look like the battered wife that she's trying to make herself out to be. So I think that it is really sad. But this is the part that I want you to understand is that Doug did not know they were not moving together. And the defense is trying to make it sound like Doug had every idea in the world that they were not moving together, and he was just basically being used and helping her pack her things so she could move. But if you're so afraid of him, why are you having him help you pack all your things so you can move to Maryland?
Weren't obligated to present anything, but we did. And I think we can agree that if the state's case does not meet that threshold of beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, your verdict must be not guilty. Ashley Benefield got on the stand and endured over 2 hours of cross-examination. It was our perception that the state never landed a blow in over 2 hours. That's 2 hours in addition to the hour and a half that I had her up there on direct examination. In the world in which we live, it sounds strange to try to reduce an event like this to an explanation within an hour and a half. But this is the only form that we have to resolve things like that. So we did it. And Ashley got up there and she explained to you exactly what happened. And she did it well. And the state never touched her. Look at the crime scene photos that were taken, not at some modeling presentation, not at some outing. Look at the crime scene photos that were taken by Ms. Dorvac. They're in evidence. And you see if you don't see swelling and redness on those photographs. So it's September 27th, 2020, the day of the homicide. Doug arrives at Ashley's house late that afternoon, and he's already simmering. He's on a slow boil, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because he knows she's leaving. She's leaving. He's not going with her. He's going to live somewhere else. He knows that. This was his last hope for any kind of reconciliation. And Bruce Ferris told you that the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is when the abuser recognizes that she's leaving. So how does Doug respond? With threats and intimidation. He would not leave. Ashley tried to de-escalate it. She could see how he was starting to build. She wanted to avoid a confrontation. Gee, you know, Doug, we pretty much got everything done. Why don't we quit for the night and we can continue tomorrow? He ignored her. Instead, his hostility starts increasing. 2 body checks where he bumps her shoulder, passing her in the hall. And it's not a bump that's an accident. It's a bump to intimidate her. She told you she almost lost her balance. Then we have the cardboard box incident where he slams that into her. Once again, she tries to de-escalate it. She even apologizes to him. And I asked her, why in the world would you apologize when he was the one who hit you with the box? Well, shortly after that, Ashley's had enough. What does she do? She tries to leave. She tries to flee the house. He catches up to her, grabs her by the hand, whirls her around. His back is now at the front door, and he's got her blocked. Somehow, Ashley finds the inner strength to yell, I'm done. You need to leave now. I'm done. You need to leave now. Please check your notes. That's going to be real important. Why? Because that revoked Doug's permission to be in Ashley's home on that afternoon. And here's what the instruction is going to tell you about that. It's in your packet. It's going to say the law on justifiable use of deadly force is as follows. If Ashley Benefield was in a dwelling in which she had a right to be, I think we can all agree this was her home. Doug did not live there. He was there by her permission on that day to help pack things. She had no duty to retreat and had the right to stand her ground and use force, including deadly force, if she reasonably believed such conduct was necessary to prevent A, imminent death or great bodily harm to herself, or B, the imminent commission of burglary, false imprisonment, or aggravated assault against herself. The elements of the forcible felony of burglary are: 1, Douglas Benefield had permission or consent to enter the dwelling or structure owned by or in possession of Ashley Benefield. 2, Douglas Benefield, after entering the structure, remained inside after permission to remain had been withdrawn, and with the intent to commit an offense other than burglary or trespass inside the structure. The offense was false imprisonment. Ashley tried to leave her home. Doug stopped her, spun her around, and held her trapped inside the house.
He
B,
never
attempt to commit a felony, forcible felony. Forcible felony is aggravated assault. Through threats and intimidation, Doug committed the offense of aggravated assault. It's in your packet. Read it. The important point is that once Ashley says, I am done, you need to leave now, he becomes, in essence, a burglar by remaining in that house after she tells him to leave. Not my words, not my law, the law that Judge White has given you. The last witness that we saw was Amy Carlton. And you might wonder how Ms. Carlton fit into all of this. Well, actually, she played a very significant role. We called Amy Carlton to show that this was anything other than a staged event. If you accept Ms. O'Donnell's interpretation of this, It was a staged event. It was a setup. Miss Carlton told you that she was out walking the dog with her husband. They heard a series of shots. And less than 30 seconds later, Ashley emerged from the house, hysterical, screaming, holding the gun, and ran right next door. If you're going to stage an event like this after the shooting, you're going to certainly check the scene to make sure it's going to support your version of the event. Because if it doesn't, you're on your way to prison. It's going to take you longer than less than 30 seconds to do that. The state has failed to prove anything here beyond a reasonable doubt. We prove self-defense beyond all doubt. But the burden is not ours. It's theirs. And they must prove it beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, which, ladies and gentlemen, they just have not done. So for the last several years, I've walked hand in hand with Ashley.
Okay, so as you can see, he does a good job of closing arguments. I will say that, but I have to say it's just very ironic how he tries to spin it that Doug had no idea that Ashley was leaving and going to Maryland without him. That's not true. Why would he go over there and pack her up and pack his daughter's stuff up? Why would they go to a mediation and cancel the injunctions and cancel the custody battle and cancel everything if he thought she was going to take their daughter to Maryland without him? That doesn't make any sense. And why would she have him over at her house if she was so deathly afraid of him to help her pack and move all of their stuff? It just doesn't make any sense. None of that makes sense. So I don't know what is taking so long for the jury to come back. But I mean, they're probably weighing out the different charges. There is manslaughter. There is involuntary manslaughter. There's just a couple of charges that they're trying to decide. And I think that, also the majority of the jury are female. I think I mentioned that in the last video. It does come in handy because females are going to look at this and go, oh my gosh, Doug is gone. This poor child, how can she do without her mother? And then, of course, by the way, her grandmother, Ashley's mom, has actual custody of Emerson, but Ashley lives with them. So Ashley is around her daughter every day. And, as a mother, and a lot of females will look at it this way and say, we don't want to take her mom away from her too. So even if they charge her, even if they convict her of either one of these charges, she could get a very low sentence. I really don't know how this could come out. This could be a hung jury. It could be, I really don't know what they're going to do. I watched Ashley on the stand. It was very Amber Heard-ish. I watched when the prosecution asked her to show her how Doug was coming after her. She couldn't do it. She couldn't set up the scene. She couldn't reenact how Doug was coming after her and attacking her. She just couldn't do it, much like Amber Heard couldn't do it either. It's because if you look at body language experts, they'll tell you that when someone is coming at you, or when you reenact an event like that, you don't reenact it from the person. It's just different. And when you're an actual victim, you can tell how an actual victim, another person, if they're an actual victim as well, you can tell if they really are a victim or survivor, or however terminology you want to use, but you can tell if they're an actual survivor, or if they actually had that happen to them, because you would know. Also, and just like that doctor said, the trauma doctor, who I really, really liked his testimony, because the way he described trauma and the way he liked to treat trauma, is when people talk about trauma, when they discuss it and they remember it, they remember trauma as if they are remembering it as if it's happening again. And he doesn't like to treat it that way. He likes to treat it differently. So he doesn't want people to remember trauma as if it's repeating itself, because you go back into that moment. And that's not how Ashley was doing. And she did not shed any tears. She got really upset. She breathed heavy. She would act out weird, but she never really cried. She just would act like she was crying. So I did not see a lot of emotion out of her as far as like real emotion. And she didn't seem like she was just making a lot of sounds. So I feel like this is going to be a tough one, because this has been going on for so long. I think the jury's having a hard time coming up with a verdict. They did ask for the transcript of the trauma doctor who testified, to find out if his evaluation was based on he and Doug's conversation together, or what Ashley had told him in their conversations together, because they wanted to know if he was getting it from Ashley or getting it from Doug. So it is a different, I guess they just want to make sure he was getting it from Doug's mouth or Ashley's mouth. They wanted to be sure. They haven't asked any legal questions yet, but they have asked about the doctor transcript, which they did not give them. So we're still waiting for a verdict. The judge told them he was going to give them until I think midnight, or if they got tired, that they could go home. But other than that, we haven't heard anything. It's been almost 5 hours they've been deliberating, and it is 9:00 Florida time. So I guess we will see what happens. But for now, we are just waiting. So I just wanted to update you. I think the prosecution did a pretty good job. I think the defense attorney was doing his job as a defense attorney. I think he was pretty frustrating and kind of annoying, not very likable, I would say. But I think it's all going to depend on how the jury hopefully will read the law. And it is just going to depend on their feelings. And that's going to, hopefully they'll follow the law. But at the end of the day, it is going to be how they feel. And I think that's going to suck, because it's not about how they should feel. It should be about the law, and it should be justice for Doug, because he lost his life while he was sacrificing everything. And the defense attorney made Doug sound like a stalker. That man uprooted his life to be with his daughter. He did not want to have any more children after his daughter Eva with his first wife. He reversed a vasectomy to make Ashley happy. They had a daughter. He uprooted his life to go be with his new child, and he was going to uproot his life again and move to Maryland. I mean, this man was doing everything in his power to be with his daughter. It wasn't necessarily about Ashley at this point. He was just trying to be with his child. And he was doing everything he could. There's so many women out there who would give anything to have the father of their child be a part of their child's life. But Ashley did everything she could to manipulate the situation, just like she did to get her ballet studio or company, and just like she did to get Doug. I mean, she did everything she could. She used her looks, she used her body, she used everything she could to get everything she wanted, and she did get everything she wanted. And she's doing it now. She's doing everything she can to wrap everybody around her finger to get what she wants and see if it works, just like she did with trying to take Doug to court over and over and over again. Unfortunately for her, she had a female judge who didn't buy her story and would not accept her in her injunctions constantly and all the lies she was telling about Doug. So I hope that this mostly female jury will see past her fakeness and realize that what she did was wrong. And if they look at the trajectory of the wounds into Doug, they will see that he was shot in the leg and in the arm that went through his arm into his body. So he was clearly not facing her and coming after her, and he was trying to go away because that's what she's saying, him coming after her, attacking her, and he was anywhere from 3 to 6 feet away from her. So there was no like stippling or gunpowder on him. There was nothing. He was far enough away from her that she could have, if he were coming after her, she could have gone away. She passed by 2 other guns in the house, by the way, to get to the one that she got to. So I'm just saying. Or she could have gone into the room and locked the door. There's so many other avenues she could have gone through to, like, I mean, so many things she could have done. She passed 2 other guns to get to the gun she got to. She passed several other rooms to get to the room she got to. She passed other exits out of the house to get to the room she got to. There was just so many other options. If people are always like, oh, you could have done this, you could have done that. There's, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but there were so many other options she had besides killing him. So if you want to look at it that way. So we'll see what happens with the verdict. And I'm still waiting, but they are nearly 5 hours in, and the judge said he would get them pizza and soda, which would be enough for me to come up with a verdict, because I would not want pizza and soda. So it just makes me think of Little Caesars or something. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll be doing more videos on Michael Jackson Bolanos and breaking down that trial even more, because we are still awaiting to hear if the prosecution is going to allow the dismissal of the retrial, and also waiting for this verdict. So thank you all so much. I hope this video turns out well. I got a new computer, so we will see. And I thank you all so much for watching. If you would like, please feel free to buy me a coffee. And you can also Cash App me or PayPal me, as you can see down here on the banner at the bottom of the screen. But also, most importantly, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment to help out the algorithm on my channel. As you know, or don't know, over 70% of the viewers of this channel do not subscribe, and they don't like, and they don't leave comments. So it would be very, very helpful if you did that. I would greatly appreciate it. 감사합니다.